Hey guys, okay, we are officially going to launch our investigation of syntax. And this is where I promised you that by the end of these next couple weeks, you guys would understand English grammar. But to lead off with that, I want to say that the term grammar is often confused with what we're calling syntax. In linguistics, grammar means the study of an entire language. So I want to go ahead and applaud you that you've been studying grammar this entire semester. From phonology to pragmatics, that all is technically grammar. But we're going to look closely at syntax now, which is a part of grammar, which typically is one that a lot of students or some get anxious about studying because you're going to remember some of these lessons from when you were younger. And I'm going to work so hard to make this really simple for you. There's a lot of information, but I've built in exercises along the way, because I think that with the practice, you can do this. And again, contact me if you want any tutoring or to work through any questions, or as you're listening to these next lectures, let's say you think of a word and you're like, well, wait, how does this word fit into what she just told me? Well, send it to me, call me, let's go over it, because we need to unfold the language together for you to actually truly learn it. I'm telling you right now, the only way you're really going to learn the next couple weeks of information, to really know it, to really learn it, is practicing. Okay, you have to practice the information. So I'm going to build in some exercises and then also give you any tutoring or any feedback you'd like. So just contact me. So again, so what is the point of syntax? Okay, the goal. What is the goal? The goal of syntax is to describe why things are either grammatical or not grammatical. So here on the left for you, I have a bunch of ungrammatical sentences. I'm sorry, on the right, the red big barn, her sang to I, is corrected the test. Those are all ungrammatical, and I don't have to tell you that. You're speakers of the language and you're able to see or at least hear and go, okay, that doesn't sound right. So here in the beginning, I want you to use that gut instinct. Ooh, that doesn't sound right, because what that means is your lexicon, your mental dictionary, is saying, I'm defying a rule I know in this language. I don't know the rule, but I know something's not right. So use that intuition as we're going through the next couple weeks. I'm going to teach you what it is that we're defying, what those rules are. So on the left-hand side are the correct grammatical forms. The big red barn, she sang to me, is the test corrected? And so we're going to learn over the next couple weeks the tools so that you could come back to questions or sentences and examples like this and say, oh, this is what's wrong with it. The key from here moving forward is that you need to be thinking about what the function of a word is, okay? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, okay? You need to think about where the word is in the sentence. What is the function of the word in the sentence? And that doesn't necessarily mean we're thinking about the meaning of the word or the word defined by the dictionary, but it means we're looking at, well, where is it? Is it at the beginning or the end of the sentence? What words are around it? What do I know about those other words in terms of what their function is? And that's going to get you through this. It's really math that we're looking at. Every sentence we're dealing with in English is a math equation, and some numbers are allowed to be around other numbers, where some numbers aren't allowed to be around those numbers. So it's actually just a mathematical equation that we're going to go over. So when you think about function, I'm giving you this example with the word water. Okay, when I say water, the first thing you're all thinking of is probably a cup of water. Mine's empty, had a lemon in it. And so you're thinking of it in its noun form, right? Water is cold. In that case, water is a noun. But I can also use the word water as a verb. I water the plants, and water as an adjective. They are at the water park. Okay, so mind blown, right? I can use one word that you were thinking, noun, as three parts of speech: noun, verb, or adjective. And it's about where it is in the sentence. And the function of the word water in that sentence tells me what part of speech it is. Today, though, as we dive into all that, everything I just showed you is a sampling of where we're going to end up at. Today, we're just going to talk, or right in this lecture, talk about nouns and pronouns. That's it. We have to scaffold. We have to build up to a bigger knowledge, and we need to start with nouns and pronouns, which hopefully nouns especially are an easier category for you. But there are lots of different types of nouns, and that's what I want to explore. So nouns. We have some heuristics. Heuristics are tips, are hints for identifying words that function as nouns. Okay, so again, when I throw a word at you, your instinct isn't to think, is that word a noun or a verb? Because words can be used in lots of different ways. Words can have many functions, just like water had many functions. But when you look at a word inside the sentence and you're looking for its function, here are some tips or some hints for identifying whether or not that word might be functioning as a noun. So my 3 tips or hints for you are that nouns, when a word is functioning as a noun, it can take the plural s. Okay, so instead of kiss, it can go kisses. It can take the possessive s. So instead of Shelby, it can be Shelby's water. And it may be preceded by an article, and that class of parts of speech was a, an, or the. So I can say the cup of water or a cup of water, okay? A water or the water. So those are my 3 hints or tricks as we move forward through this. I will present this information again in other lectures, but this is what I want you to be thinking of when you're like, okay, is this word functioning as a noun or something else? By definition, we're going to go off of this simple definition that a noun is a person, place, or thing, okay? So person, I've given you 2 examples, mother and Shelby. Place, mountain and Colorado. And thing, mouse, phone, and peace. As in, they bring peace. Peace can be a noun, depending on the sentence, right? So I'm giving you these 7 words as nouns. And so I want to explore what we know about nouns with these 7 words. So our first hint or tip, what I called a heuristic, was that nouns can take the plural s. Okay, so I'm looking at our 7 words and I was adding the plural s to them and I realized, wow, not all of these can take the plural s. Mothers, we can have more than one mother, right? So the mothers are at Chick-fil-A. The mountains in the distance, the phones are on sale. Okay, so those all naturally take the plural s. Other nouns like Shelby and Colorado don't necessarily take it. And that's just because of the type of nouns they are. You would, if there were like 10 Shelbys like me in a room, you could say the Shelbys are in the room, right? Given the circumstance, whatever the context is, you might be able to add the plural s to Shelby if there are lots of Shelbys you're talking about. Colorado, you wouldn't necessarily add a plural s because I can only think of one Colorado. I'm thinking of the state, right? The Colorados. Are there multiple? Not in the way I'm talking about it. Mouses is not a word, so it can't take that plural s, and we're going to discuss that later. And pieces. Now, it doesn't necessarily sound right, the pieces, but technically, pieces can take that plural s. So they brought pieces, okay, peace as in harmony, right? They brought harmony, they brought peace, pieces to us. So I can't think of a good sentence, but I'm telling you, it can take the plural s. You just haven't heard it that way, right? Now, typically though, when we use peace, we're not adding a plural to it, and there's a reason why. I'll show you in a little bit. The other hint or heuristic I gave you is that they can take the possessive. So I can say the mother's child, Shelby's child, the mountain's sheep, right? Colorado's sunsets. The mouses still doesn't work, discussing it later. Phones. My phone's apps are not working, okay? And pieces. Now, technically, again, we could pluralize pieces, but it's not a common way that we use the word. And so I'm leaving it there. But again, it's about function in the sentence. there are an infinite number of sentences we can create in English, and given the situation we're using them, it might make sense. Articles, the third and last heuristic I gave you, the tip, was that articles may be preceded by an article. I'm sorry, nouns. Nouns may be preceded by an article. So I can say, the mother was at the store, the mountains in the distance, the mouse in the kitchen, the phone on the counter, the piece they brought. Okay? The Shelby doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense. It can work though. It depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about Shelby like a car? So you could say the Shelby is in the garage. But if you're talking about me, saying the Shelby is in the house, that doesn't make any sense, right? And we're going to discuss why that doesn't work too, as well as the Colorado, why that doesn't work as well. So based on these 3 hints and tricks I gave you, here's our summary, right? So here's our 7 nouns on the left. They represent person, place, and thing. And here's the ones that easily take a plural S or the possessive S, or the article. And in case you didn't know, possessive S means ownership, right? So like Shelby's water, I possess the water. Okay, so we'll discuss some of these blank spaces as well, but basically what I'm showing you is if you wanted to use those heuristics, those tips to figure out if something's a noun, they cover a majority of what we provided to you. The one that's most alarming is mouse, right? The heuristics didn't quite cover all of that, but I'm going to talk to you about that as we proceed through this. There are lots of different types of nouns, and there are reasons you need to know the difference, specifically because you will be teaching these different types of nouns, these different categories of nouns to your students, whether they are only native English speakers or whether they are learning English as a second language. These are worksheets they will use. I'm not giving you worksheets, but these are noun categories that will be on worksheets you're giving them. So I pose the question, what's the difference between the left and the right group of words? These are all nouns in the way I'm presenting it to you. So what's the difference? If you don't want to know yet, go ahead and pause your computer because I'm going to tell you. The difference is that those on the left are common nouns and those on the right are proper nouns. These are the common nouns are general concepts. They're not referencing unique items, anything specific by its like proper name, and because of that, they're not capitalized. Typically, these can take the article they, a, or an, right? A mother, the mother, a mountain, the mountain, a mouse, the mouse, a state, the state, an apple, the apple, right? Okay, so they're common, they're general concepts. Proper nouns, on the other hand, are specific and they uniquely they reference something unique, and so therefore they are capitalized. These do not always take an article. So you wouldn't say the Professor Shelby is working from home for the next couple weeks. You would say Professor Shelby is working from home. You wouldn't say the Mount Rushmore or the Colorado or the Mighty Mouse. I don't know if you Mighty Mouse the cartoon, okay? It's the name of this cartoon mouse. So these are proper nouns, proper names, and they don't take an article. So based on that heuristic and that information about common or proper, it helps us make sense why Shelby and Colorado didn't get marked with articles on this grid. So I'm not going to necessarily address this grid throughout the whole presentation, but that was one of the categories of nouns that helps us distinguish what needs an article and what doesn't. Now, the important thing is I want to tie this back to why you need to know it. There are common errors your students are going to make because they don't necessarily know the difference between common and proper nouns. And here are some. I went to the Mount Rushmore. Okay, well, Mount Rushmore is a proper noun, so it doesn't need the article. They could just say, I went to Mount Rushmore. I saw mouse in kitchen. I'm going to tell you, and I think I've told you before, some languages, especially Asian languages, don't have articles in their language. Okay, they don't have the, a, or un in their first language. So when they get to a language like English that has those, they're not naturally going to think to include them because their first language doesn't require that. It doesn't need that syntactically. So I have as I think I've shared in class before, I have a professor who has used English for years. Since she was a child and is much older than me and still would say, I have prepared I have prepared lesson for you instead of I have prepared the lesson or a lesson. So the struggle with using nouns is a very frequent thing, and these are legitimate errors your students might come across, which is why we focus on what's the difference between a common and a proper noun. So again, another set of words. What's the difference between the left group and the right group of words? What's the difference between mother and the difference between stuff? Besides meaning, right? I know that. But how do they function differently as nouns? The nouns on the left are all count nouns, and the nouns on the right are non-count nouns. The nouns on the left can be counted or measured, so they can take the plural s. There are 5 mothers at Chick-fil-A. The tall mountains in the distance. There are 50 states. I have 3 phones. That was a lengthy lecture. Okay. It says lengthy poem, but I realize all my mini lectures are getting quite long. Non-count nouns, on the other hand, they cannot be counted or measured. They cannot take the plural s. So I have 5 stuffs. Okay, we don't say, I can say I have stuff, but I can't quantify it, I can't count it. I can say I have 5 boxes of stuff. I can use another noun, a count noun, to help me quantify it. But you can never use a quantity and a non-count noun right next to each other. So I can't say I have 5 stuffs. I can't say I have 6 homeworks. I can say I have 6 pages of homework. I don't have several musics. I have several CDs of music. I don't have a poetry. I have a book of poetry. I don't have an advice. I have advice, or I have a book on advice. And I don't have a piece. I have peace, or I have a book on peace. I've got lots of books. I probably actually have a book on that. Okay, so that's the difference between count and non-count. Here's how this shows up in errors that your students are going to produce. She gave me an advice. Okay, now the great thing about us in English and that type of error is I still know what the speaker is saying. I know that this speaker received advice, but it is an error nonetheless, right? She gave me an advice. This is a non-count noun, so it can't have un, meaning one, in front of it. She gave me advice is the correct version. The box contained many photo of my family. Okay? Well, photo needs the plural s for that to work. Many photos. Photos is a count noun, right? So if you're going to say many, it needs to have, if you're going to quantify it, the count noun requires the plural. I have 3 children's. Well, children's is not a count noun, right? Children is means multiple, right? So, or children is a count noun, but it doesn't require the plural. So I have 3 children's. It's instinctual to over apply the S. And we're going to look here in a couple slides on what's going on with that word children. So we have some more nouns. Some of these are on the other screens because a noun can be more than one thing. It can be count and non-count and proper and common. Okay, it's not like it's just one of these categories. I'm just showing you the vastness of these nouns. So the difference between the left and the right category: mother, phone, street, solar system, versus the right: peace, happiness, unity. And I have peace on there a second time for whatever reason. This is the difference between concrete and abstract nouns. The nouns on the left are nouns that you can literally touch and see with your senses, okay? They are tangible objects, where the nouns on the right are very abstract. They're more like ideas. You can't touch them or access them with any of your senses. They're concepts: happiness, unity, peace, inspiration. And there are some errors your students are going to make with these. So one I have observed in the past is someone had said, tell me a history. Okay, tell me a history. The error here is twofold, though, I want to point out. History is an abstract noun. You can't touch history. We can talk about it. We can print up the ideas of it. But history is not something here I can touch, right? It's a concept. The other thing about the word history is that it's an uncountable noun. We don't say the histories have told us. We say history has told us. It doesn't need, I don't say that I have 5 history I can say I have 5 lessons on history. So there's 2 errors actually occurring with this, but it's important to point that out that again, nouns might be in more than one of these categories. They obviously are. But these, it's lack of awareness of these different types of nouns that's causing errors like this. And that's why you'll be teaching some of these specific sets on different worksheets and in these textbooks that you're using with your students. They're going to literally address the difference between concrete and abstract. We got another group of words here: desktop, mother-in-law, water cycle. And then we have on the right, team, herd, crowd. I want to pause you right here. With these 2 lists, we're not comparing and contrasting them. I know we did that in the prior slides, but I'm using one slide here just to introduce you to 2 more different types of nouns. So again, don't compare and contrast these like the previous slides. These are just 2 different additional thoughts on nouns. The one on the left is the list on the left are compound nouns, which you're familiar with because we've gone over compounding in prior lessons. Okay, when we went over morphology, we talked about compounding. So these are nouns made up of 2 or more words. They may have a hyphen or space or no space, but the function of the phrase is the noun. Okay, so washing machine, that's 2 words. I see that it's 2 words. Washing means one thing, machine means another, but we have to look at washing machine as a phrase, right? It's a phrase noun, it's a compound noun, because collectively it gives you a very specific image, right? You are thinking of your laundry room right now, and literally your washing machine. So those are compound nouns. Now we also have another class of nouns called collective nouns, and these are nouns that represent groups of things, things that are spoken of as a whole. I have a comment at the bottom. Are you referring to green beans? So the compound noun, you guys ever have, well, we've all been buying cans, right, because of the quarantine. So maybe you bought green beans, I don't know. So that's a compound noun, right? A can of green beans is a compound noun. Now I want to point out, because we're talking about function, and we're going to get to this later, that there's a difference between green beans, meaning the can of green beans, and I have beans that are green. So like, think about lima beans, right? Those are green as well. Those are also green beans. Lima beans are green beans. So there's a difference with what we're doing there because, again, we're talking about form and function, and we'll learn a little bit more about that, but it's going to get fun, okay? There are some errors that students will make with especially those collective nouns. So Manny has gray hairs. Okay, so that can work, right? Let's say Manny has mostly jet black hair, but has a few gray hairs coming up in between. Great. But let's say Manny's entire head was gray. Okay, Manny no longer has black hair. It's often that hair, which is a collective noun. It meets our definition of collective, a group of things that has been spoken of, that's spoken of as a whole. Hair, right? It's representing this whole thing up here. So you might hear a speaker say Manny has gray hairs when they mean hair as in the whole collective head as opposed to individual units. There's another error type. The team are going to the store. The correct form there should be the team is going to the store. Here we have an error with not understanding how team works as a collective noun. So we're not using the right verb. So is a verb, are is a verb. Verbs is one of your upcoming lectures, so don't worry about understanding that now. But here's an error using a collective noun because this stuff happens. This is why you need to know this stuff because you're going to help all these wonderful students maximize their English skills. There's another type of noun that I want to introduce you to, and that's regular and irregular nouns. If you saw earlier, we had the noun mouse that we couldn't quite use with plural and we couldn't use with possessive because there was something else going on there. And that's because they're regular nouns and irregular nouns. Regular nouns will take the plural S. Mother, mothers. Phone, phones. River, rivers. Irregular nouns are nouns that it depends what language they came from, right? What's their history of the word? But they don't technically they can't take the plural S. There's a whole different form for the plural. So mouse and mice. Woman and women. Goose and geese. min and man, or man and min, right? Luckily, the irregular noun class is very small, okay? So obviously, when you're working with nouns with your students, you're more likely going to work with these regular nouns first because they can take that plural s, right? We can use that inflectional suffix s on a ton of them. It's very productive. Where this irregular noun is very small class. The funny thing about this in regards to errors is I hear language learners make these errors all the time, but I also hear native speakers like you and me make these errors all the time. So I have heard people say there are mices in the kitchen, right? So they knew not to say there are mouses, but they got to mice and then they pluraled mice, right? So mices. So it's really funny because native speakers do this stuff all the time. Here is a YouTube video that if you have a second, you should totally watch it because it's a group of guys arguing over whether or not it's mice, mices, mouses, mousesses, and it's super funny. So again, we just talked crash course about nouns. There are lots of different types of nouns. You don't have to have this memorized. The important thing is that you understand nouns help us identify people, places, and things, which I think you're capable of doing. And here are some tips and hints again for identifying whether or not something is a noun. So we've gone over quite a few different categories of nouns at this point. We've gone over common and proper nouns. We've gone over count and non-count nouns, concrete and abstract, compound and collective, and regular and irregular. You're going to pause here and do a quick exercise on this short one, and then you're going to come back to or go to the next lecture where you are going to learn about pronouns. And again, there's a reason we're starting with nouns and pronouns because it's building up to a larger picture with syntax. You do not have to have all this memorized. Just be aware there's a lot going on with nouns and that they can look many different ways. Okay, I'll see you guys at the next lecture. Bye.